You are listening to the podcast That's Life in Sweden, or as we say in Swedish, Sånt i Livet i Sverige, with me, your host, Lisa Åsimäki. So today I'm welcoming Professor Nita Temmerman, who is an international higher education consultant with a fascinating background and experience working in the Australian higher education sector, where she has held several senior leadership positions across 3 Australian states. Hello and welcome, Nita.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to talk with you today, Lisa. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. So am I. How are you? How is Brisbane?
Very hot. Although today's only 30 degrees, the other day it was 37 degrees Celsius. So we were very hot.
And that's a little bit different. Here in Sweden right now, I thought it was like 4 degrees.
Oh, okay.
But we are moving towards the better times because spring is around the corner.
All right. Look forward to that.
Yes. Okay, so to start off with, I'm curious to find out, what was it that attracted you initially to education and then led you to continue working in higher education?
Well, I started out as a secondary or a high school teacher, and in a way it was something I sort of fell into. My area was actually music and music education, but I knew that I didn't have what it takes to be a concert pianist. But I had already been doing some teaching and I really enjoyed that. But after a couple of years of teaching high school students, I knew that I wanted to do more, but I still wanted to stay in education. So I went on to complete a master's degree and I secured my first university post, teaching post. And I really enjoyed that, engaging with students who were a mix of ages, who had very different backgrounds and experiences. And of course, I was still interacting with schools because the students were all students in a faculty of education. So they were all studying either early childhood or primary or secondary education. And I still had the opportunity to observe those student teachers on their practicum in all of those different settings. The other interesting thing about that first university was that it was invested in providing what was then called external studies. So I was also involved in preparing written materials for students who were studying in rural areas and conducting telephone tutorials with those remote students during the semester. So my very first teaching post in the university was a very steep learning curve, but I loved it and the challenges and the learning it provided. And I can remember one memorable occasion being asked by a senior colleague if I would like to contribute a research article to an international journal. And that was a big deal for me. It was a lovely, tremendous entree into the international arena. And since then, I have held academic positions in 4 other universities here in Australia before I started to take an interest in leadership roles in education. And that started with a director of curriculum position and chairing a university committee about academic quality. And then, Lisa, I also completed a PhD. And then, as you would know, there sort of comes a time when, as an academic, you have to decide what path you want to take. Is it going to be the teaching and research path, or is it going to be the managerial leadership path? And I still wanted to do some teaching and I still wanted to keep some research going, but I also wanted to be able to make an impact at the university-wide level. And that really led me into positions as Executive Dean of Faculties of Education and as Pro Vice-Chancellor Academic and Pro Vice-Chancellor International Partnerships. And they were really rewarding positions, really demanding roles, but very rewarding. And now, of course, I'm enjoying life as an independent consultant, working with universities and higher education providers here in Australia, but also overseas on lots of different types of projects. And I also really enjoy writing about those experiences and other topical issues that are relevant to higher education.
You have held many senior leadership positions in higher education institutions in Australia. Which one do you believe was the most enjoyable experience? And which one would you say would have been the most challenging?
That is an excellent question. And in some ways, it's incredibly difficult to answer. So let me just preface my response by saying that it's the culture of any organisation and the people that make up that organisation and the structure and the systems. All of those things play a huge part in making it a more enjoyable or challenging organisation to work in. And for me, the experience is enjoyable if I'm given the trust and the appropriate freedom to do my job and to try new things and have the opportunity to grow. And I also know what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at. So I also enjoy being able to bring a team together that have got diverse talents and working well with that team to bring something through to fruition. I've also worked with some amazing leaders. Some haven't been that amazing, but those that have been great role models and mentors for me. And they displayed very high standards. They knew where they were going. They were approachable. They were tough, but always fair in their decision making. And they're the sorts of attributes that I also subscribe to and try to display. But look, every position that I've held has had its positives and negatives, with some parts being enjoyable and some challenging. But I will share with you, Lisa, a little bit about the most challenging experience in my career. It was assuming an Executive Dean of Education position in a faculty that can only be called dysfunctional in all sorts of ways. And I think it had been like that for quite some time. There were factions within that faculty, with some staff not talking to other staff or treating other staff terribly. There was inequity in workloads amongst staff, with senior academics who'd organised a very comfortable load for themselves, and they left the junior academics with totally unfair workloads. There were ways of teaching that were wasteful, in need of a total overhaul. Research was hardly being supported. Overall, it was a mess, and it was a really difficult environment. I mean, I really had no idea what I was walking into. I was only the second female dean that the faculty had ever had, and they had driven the first female dean out of the university. There was a real strong old guard who sort of de facto controlled everything. So, as I tried to make the necessary changes, I was roadblocked by that old guard at nearly every turn. The worst, however, was that I received little real support from those above me, those who I reported to, and I was looking to them for assurance. They were listening to the disgruntled old guard, and they were receiving reports from them, and they were taking their concerns seriously. So I was really the meat and the sandwich, and it was incredibly stressful, upsetting and unfair, I thought. But I soldiered on because I'd signed up for the job. I was determined to do it. I could see what needed doing, and I was determined to get there. And what really kept me going was the staff, the academic and the administrative staff in the faculty. And they could see that what I was trying to do wasn't for my own benefit, but it was for the faculty's future reputation. And I also had wonderful support from my deputy deans and some of the fellow executive deans of other faculties in the university. And we did achieve the goals that we set over 3 painful years, but I had the opportunity to bring in new people who were receptive to the changes, and that helped to develop that change of culture that was needed in the faculty. And the disgruntled group, well, some of them left, some of them stayed, but they became a minority who no longer had that power base, and they couldn't any longer bully staff. And as the reputation of the faculty grew, because of the changes made, more and more faculty members embraced those changes and their support increased. And, Lisa, we became the very first faculty of education in Australia to develop and deliver a wholly online undergraduate teacher education program. And I remain incredibly proud of that achievement.
Wow, that is amazing. The first online teacher education program that you developed in your in the faculty you were in charge of?
Yes, correct.
My goodness.
With a great team of people around. Now, of course, others have copied and done other amazing things that are similar to that, but it was a real coup to have arrived at that particular achievement.
Can I ask you, how do you think you got the trust from the staff and the administration personnel in the faculty?
I think it's because I was constantly communicating why I was doing or getting the faculty to come along with me to do the sorts of things we were doing. Communication was absolutely key. We had forums and we had all sorts of working days and working parties put together. I really made an attempt to listen to other people's ideas, to listen to their concerns and so on. But then with that vision, it was also a matter of making sure that we were starting to get things going along the way. So as people could see that we were achieving and we were actually starting to meet those goals, they could see that, oh, good, we are actually improving on what we're doing. It made their life better. And I think also that because of those inequitable sorts of things that were happening in the faculty, seeing some of those totally disappear was a real eye-opener for others who had not had a voice up till then. And bringing in those new people from other places who said, of course we should be doing that. I don't know why there's an issue in the faculty about trying those things out. I think, there were lots of things. It wasn't one particular thing. But the most important, from my perspective, was clear, consistent communication. And the trust came when they could see that I wasn't doing it for me, I was doing it for the reputation of the faculty.
That brings me to the next questions, which relate to the purpose of higher education.
Look, that is another big question, and I agree. Higher education should and does play a significant role in today's society, in broader society, because people look to higher education institutions not only to respond to particular societal needs, but also to be drivers of change. And how do they expect universities and higher education institutions to do that? Well, an important part of their role is preparing graduates who are the idea-creating professionals. I love that particular phrase. And they're the people who are going to positively contribute to society. So higher education's role is to help develop that next generation who are going to help advance and hopefully improve society by taking new and better approaches to some of the problems that exist at the moment. Because we need people to be able to look at problems from different perspectives, to think about new or different ways of tackling them, to ask the what if question. What if we tried this, or what if we did that? So we end up with improved approaches, and it might be to building homes or bridges or roads or growing crops or finding cures for medical conditions or helping save our planet, our environment. And I've worked in a number of different countries, and especially in developing countries, where there might be just the one university, and a lot of pressure is put on that institution to meet the human resource needs of the country and to actually help transform the social and the economic condition of that country. And those higher education institutions are mandated by government to meet the country's social and economic demands. And they're looking to higher education institutions to build the skilled workers that are needed, especially in education, to have the primary and the secondary school teachers, and in healthcare to develop nurses, social workers, allied health professionals, and in business development for tourism and the financial sector. And I think also that recent global events have meant that all educational institutions around the world are doing a lot more thinking about what they do and how they will operate into the future. And I also believe that today's learners also recognise that gaining a good education is about much more than just preparing them for a job for them. And it's interesting to see some of the larger companies like Google and Tesla or IBM, they don't even rely on a potential employee having a degree anymore as a point of entry. Their hiring decisions are based on candidates having other sorts of qualities like leadership potential, problem solving, good communication skills. And look, any training they need, well, they provide it on the job for them. So in closing, I believe that the role of higher education today is about equipping the next generation with the sorts of professional attributes and learning tools that are going to set them up for life, so they will be flexible and adaptable, but also that they will be creative contributors to society and they will be decent global citizens, because the world we're living in today and today's society is going to rely more and more on the talents and the ideas and the creative knowledge of its population as being its major assets.
So the role of higher education has changed quite a bit from what it used to be.
Oh, and it continues to change. If we go back, and I'm actually preparing a paper at the moment, which is looking at refocusing the purpose of higher education to go back to almost the original Plato's idea of the liberal education. And some universities have tried that, rather than we've had all those changes brought about by technology and by the pressure for employment prospects that universities should be providing for students, for graduates. And I think we're starting to go back to that original Plato idea of that liberal education, of creative, critical thinkers becoming decent human beings and decent global citizens and so on. So as society changes and evolves, and I think a lot has happened, Lisa, since we've had the COVID and war in Ukraine and so on, that people and universities are starting to really rethink, well, what are we here for and what can we do? And have we lost sight of what our broader role in society really is?
And that can be very challenging for university who are very set in the way they have been working, and they can feel it's kind of overwhelming, a little bit like COVID when it hit the world. You know, it was scary, it overwhelmed everyone. We had no idea what we were doing from one day to the next. And you had to kind of sit down, take a deep breath and rethink, if you like, life.
Absolutely. I agree totally. But the other thing with universities is, and we always talk about this, we need to make change, we need to transform what goes on, but they are such large bureaucratic organizations. If you're going to make anything change, you have to have a working party that then puts a green paper together, a white paper together, becomes a green paper, becomes an implementation, becomes a policy. And by the time you actually get round to implementing something, that idea is almost old hat. So I think one of the things that universities need to really look at very carefully is how they're structured and their systems, and are they agile and how they're able to actually implement quickly on a needs basis some of those changes. Good changes, positive changes, but some of the unnecessary bureaucracy that exists in not only universities, but any large organisation, some of that needs to be looked at seriously. Something has to be done about that.
You're absolutely right. I don't know from how it is now in Australia, but I do know that risk-taking or doing new things is starting to be looked at. Okay, this is something we are willing to look at, but then you also have those against changes that goes too quickly.
Yes, but guess what? COVID-19 actually demonstrated that universities can be agile and can make quick changes when they absolutely need to. So I think we've got a good example there of universities being agile when push comes to shove. The other thing that happened, but it could have happened even better, I think, through COVID, was cooperation amongst universities. There are universities here in Australia, in Canada, and other places that have been using the blended learning model, the online learning model, for many years, almost for as long as online and the internet has existed. And I think that they had a role to play in sharing the good and the bad and what happened and what worked and what didn't work with others, and for others to actually learn from those more developed universities in terms of their online development as well. So the cooperation that could exist still doesn't quite exist as much as it should within the broader university world.
That's true. And that comes, of course, that's got to do with that. We want to try, this is, if you like, about keeping our ideas close to our heart, because we really don't want to compete, so it comes back to that. But internationalization is interesting. Now, you working as an international higher education consultant across the world, but is there an experience that has had an impact on you as a person that you want to share?
Look, I thank you for that question. I've had the good fortune of being involved in some really exciting higher education projects in places in Vietnam and Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea, in Iraq, in Hong Kong, just to name a few. And those places are just incredibly rich in culture, and the people are so hospitable. If you're open and honest with them, they are incredibly inviting and warm. And I think every experience has had an impact on me as a person. And it's been really rewarding to have built up relationships with some of the places that I've worked with, the people, and they keep in contact with me to this very day. And overall, the experience of being a consultant and being invited to work on a specific project is really different to the experience of working full-time for a university. It's a much freer experience. You're not connected to the politics of the place. You've been invited as an expert who's listened to and respected and is there to deliver what they hope is going to be an honest assessment or a set of proposals for action. And every place I've worked with, I've learned something new, because every experience is unique in some way, and the people you work with are different too. But let me just give you two quick examples that come to mind. In northern Iraq, I met, and I was working with a university there, I met a young university student whose brother was injured in a bomb blast, and that had killed 2 other students on their way to classes at university. And he also told me about his father, who had been kidnapped, and they paid the ransom that was asked for, but they killed his father anyway. I was just so impressed with his strength and his bravery. And the one thing that kept him going was his determination to study hard and help his family. I mean, that left just an immense impression. And then in the Solomon Islands, where I spent a lot of time on multiple visits, helping set up a new university there was always intermittent internet access. There was often no hot water available because someone had forgotten to organise to deliver the gas bottles. And there were times when there was absolutely no water available anywhere at all on the island. And you never knew when the electricity would go off. But guess what? The locals were never fazed. They just accepted it. They didn't worry about things that they had absolutely no control over. And we just kept on going. And it was just a wonderful learning experience for me. I learned a bit more patience.
that's like living in the moment. You just have to, you have no choice.
Oh, yeah. We're sitting in the dark. We can't have a cup of tea or coffee, but we can at least talk to each other. Absolutely. And look, in some of the places that I've been to, I have been so surprised by the state of the roads and the hospitals and the schools and the universities. Yet in every single place, education is revered. It's absolutely seen as a way to improve their own life and those of the community. It's really that value that they have of wanting to give something back to their community. And you know what? That's not something that young people in Australia truly appreciate. And it's good, I think, for someone like me to be reminded of how different people's reality is to your own. And I think I've become a better listener and more aware of and sensitive to some of these different cultural values and practices. And what they see as the most important thing is education. They will do anything and everything to ensure that their children get to primary school, get to secondary school, and hopefully get into university, or try and apply for a scholarship to an overseas university. It's really heartwarming when you see that, and how hard these parents work and under what conditions they work to ensure that education is placed as their number one priority.
Internationalization has always been and continues to be an important part of higher education. But do you have a particular way of defining internationalization?
Well, internationalization can mean many things. And most all higher education institutions have got an internationalisation strategy, and that usually includes goals related to research and teaching and study abroad and scholar exchange programs, things like that. Many have also got established strategic international partnerships, and they've signed memorandums of understanding, MOUs, with varying degrees of success. And I've seen too many of those MOUs just stay in the drawer of a Vice-Chancellor, never to be looked at again. But I guess in the area of research, internationalisation might mean institution to institution or research centre to research centre partnerships, addressing research issues of international significance that lead to joint research outputs like research papers and government reports and conferences and so on. And internationalisation can also include providing outbound study tours, overseas study and work experience opportunities for students, student exchange programs. And then internationalisation is all about equipping students with knowledge and understandings about international perspectives and what that might mean for them should they want to work in the future in an international environment. So then internationalisation is about graduates becoming more globally aware and appreciating cultural and religious and social differences. And internationalisation can then also mean incorporating a global perspective into curriculum content, into student learning activities and into their assessment tasks, and opportunity for joint curriculum development and cooperative course delivery between institutions in different countries. And of course, internationalisation might also include strategies for attracting international students to study at an institution full-time, or attracting staff from other countries as part of a visiting scholars program. And I think over the past 10 years or so, we've also seen the growth of branch campuses and articulation arrangements grow. And the other thing that I wasn't aware of until I really got involved with accreditation authorities in different countries was it's interesting to see how academic quality assurance standards in one country have been influenced by those that have been established in another. And I think that's another example of how cooperative internationalisation works. But I think it's really important, Lisa, that we don't lose sight of the original principles of internationalisation. And, that was really about mutual understanding and human capital development and cooperation. I think there might be just a little bit too much concentration at the moment on the revenue raising side, recruiting income generating international students who then are there to subsidise other activities that are happening in a university. Now, we live, and we hear this all the time, we live in a globally connected world. We're all impacted in some way by what's happening in different places. Like we've had the impact of COVID-19 on schooling at all levels, as we've already talked about. We've got the shocking war in Ukraine. We've got the terrible earthquake disaster in Turkey and Syria, to which the world reaction on the whole has been one of cooperation and support. And I think those events have really brought to the fore our moral obligation as a global community for cooperation. And I think there's a leadership role for universities in developed countries with well-established reputations in research and academic program delivery to partner with universities in less developed countries to help support them to share what they know. And we've seen some really lovely examples of that in how universities have reacted to the disasters and how they are accommodating the ongoing education of students who've been displaced by events in their home country. So your question was, do I have a definition? In a nutshell, okay, before I forget, in a nutshell, I think internationalisation is many things, and it's really about ensuring an international and intercultural dimension as part of what is incorporated into all educational experiences and activities. And I think that the focus for all higher education should be about making that UN, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, a reality, the one that talks about a quality education that's inclusive, it's accessible, it's equitable, it's fair. So all places have got appropriately trained teachers. All students have got access to the resources they need to be successful. There is a quality assured curriculum. What is taught meets international quality standards. So it's meeting, ultimately it's about making and meeting that UN Sustainable Development Goal.
I like the idea that we go back to, let's think about what does internationalization actually mean. And one of the things that I think we seem to, and this comes back to, we go and do some work at a place, and we want that country or that university to be like our country's universities. So we like to impose our culture or the way we do things, and not listening to their culture and then allowing them to take part of the good things from our culture that would suit their way of living and being. And one of those things, I think, is causing kind of tension amongst universities, because there is this thing that, I certainly know that here in North we do things this way, and, this is supposed to be great. I know Australian education system is fantastic. And then we have countries that haven't reached those levels yet. And I think sometimes it's like you imposing yourself as to, this is how to do it.
And with that sort of approach, it's not going to work. It's going to fall over. And I think we've seen that. Australia has supported a number of countries, and I won't mention particular places or things, but by doing exactly that, by saying, no, this is how you do it, and we'll bring the experts in, and the experts will show you how to do it, and then you do it that way. Well, they actually are negating the fact that these places have incredibly rich cultures themselves, and that they already have an education system. And what we need to do is complement their education system to ensure that it meets particular standards, and that their students are going to be recognised should those students want to study or work outside that particular country or place, but not to negate what they already have and how they are already doing things. And that's something that I've learned a lot about, I think, through my work as an international consultant, more so than when I was working for a university, because you're right, the university says, no, as a Pro Vice-Chancellor International Partnerships, I want you to come back with at least 150 new students who are going to bring in this many dollars to the university, blah, blah. So it's a very different sort of environment when you're able to work as a consultant and you see things and you can appreciate a very different way of operating.
You know, you are a woman in a leadership, or you have had a lot of leadership positions. I need to ask you this question. What are some of the challenges for women in leadership position? You know, certainly I know, you know, give us an example of your own, but particularly now as a consultant, what are some of the challenges? I'm thinking of some of the countries you go to that are very, if you like, male-dominated or what do you call it?
Patriarchal.
Yes, patriarchal
societies. Yes. Oh, you're absolutely right. And Papua New Guinea is a prime example. And I can remember walking into workshops. And there were some of the participants, the male participants, were chiefs from a particular village, and they were absolutely amazed that they were going to have a woman holding this workshop. And they turned and faced the back wall and wouldn't look at me for the entire time. Now, that was my very first experience. Going into a developing country, one that wasn't quite as developed as what I thought it was, and having that sort of experience. I've got to say that I was a little bit shaken up, but I continued because there were other people there who didn't do that, and they did listen to what we had to say. But it was they didn't want to participate in any discussions. They didn't want to participate in any work groups that were actually set up. So, yes, I've had those sorts of experiences. And I've been told also, don't you think you come in here as a woman and think you're an expert on everything because, and I mean, you just have to smile sometimes. And the interesting thing is that if you only go into a place once, I don't think you can make those changes as well as if you have an opportunity to go back. And it's all about developing relationships. And it's what you said earlier, Lisa. It's about building trust with the people. And I think I'm a pretty social person. I like to be sociable. I do like to listen to people. I do like to learn from people. And I think when they can see that, and I'm not there to impose, I am there to learn from them as well, then they do turn around. But I have had some very interesting experiences, or not being allowed to come into a room because it was only for men, and no women were allowed in that room. So, you know, I've had some different sorts of experiences, but I think that look, women in leadership positions. Gosh, we could talk about this for a long time.
We have to come back to this.
Women in leadership positions today still face a lot of challenges. And I read a really lovely Eleanor Roosevelt biography a while ago, an amazing woman. And there was a quote in that which was attributed to her, and I've never forgotten it. She said, "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets in hot water." And I think that a lot of women leaders are placed in hot water or face scrutiny on many more dimensions than a man leader. And I think they're held to a higher standard than their male counterparts. You know, men tend to believe in their capabilities and even overstate them more so than women. If a woman talks up her accomplishments, and most men seem much less shy about doing that, then they say, "Oh, very pushy, and what a show-off." But if they're self-effacing and they're very quiet in their style, then they're criticised for being unimpressive and weak. So, you know, women have to often tread that fine line of being viewed as either too pushy or too soft. And men don't face the need to be agreeable while they're exercising leadership, and we've certainly got plenty of examples of that in politics. And then there's the emphasis on a woman's worth still being measured by her appearance. And I think opinion leaders and the media have got a really important role to play here in how they portray women leaders. And, you know, I think back to the USA election in which Hillary Clinton, an amazing, talented woman, the Democratic candidate, and there she was up against you know who. And the media reported on her thick ankles and her wrinkles and what she wore and, oh, she doesn't have the endurance to do the job. They didn't concentrate on what she had to say. And then even more recently, that lovely Jacinda Ardern, the outgoing Prime Minister of New Zealand, well, there was a journalist. Yeah, there was a journalist who asked her, I don't know if you heard this, oh, are you dyeing your hair to cover up the grey? And another one who said, oh, isn't it delightful that you're meeting with the Prime Minister of Finland? Two young women leaders together. You're the same age. You must have lots in common. I mean, really, what male leaders have been asked such sexist questions? So I think there are still contradictions today between what is viewed as acceptable feminine behaviour and then the requirements of assuming a leadership position. And it's something that women have to contend with, you know, this notion that, well, the two don't mesh. You can't be feminine and a leader. But I also think that women are much more aware of those challenges and the potential costs of leadership. And many rate, you know, moving up the ladder into a leadership position, oh, it's not really a positive thing at all. And I personally saw examples of this. Very capable women in universities who would have made superb leaders, they just weren't willing to fight the battles that have got nothing to do with them being able to do the job. And in workshops that I've conducted on leadership with groups of women, they often comment on what they see, how women in leadership positions are treated. And they say, well, why on earth would I want to do that? We see how you're treated. And, you know, they make comments like in one particular workshop, they talked about doors being closed or carefully guarded by their male colleagues. They couldn't supervise doctoral students because it was the male academic sharing co-supervision only with another male colleague. Or they didn't approach female experts when industry opportunities presented themselves. Or they were exclusive in research projects, even when they related directly to a female's academic area of expertise. So I really feel that institutions could do a lot more to openly, honestly address such issues and better support women. But on the other hand, women leaders also have an important mentor role to play to aspiring capable women leaders. And as more established leaders, they could endorse women who seek leadership roles. And I guess that as women continue to move forward and challenge some of those ridiculous predefined beliefs about their leadership capacity, then institutions, organisations and society as a whole will have to reevaluate their ideas about women leading the way. And look, I just came to mind just now another quote by Margaret Thatcher, you know, the Prime Minister of Great Britain for all those years. And I hope I get it right. She said, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman.
A woman.
I'll leave it at that. Let's not say any more. I'll get into trouble.
Okay, to finish off, a final question. I'm going to leave a couple of questions because I will ask you if we can do another podcast interview because there's too many things. But the one I want to finish off asking you, what is next for you now?
More consultancy roles, I hope, more writing projects. And I also, I continue to work with a number of accreditation authorities in different countries. And I really enjoy that, looking at what is happening in universities in other countries and the quality assurance standards that they are trying to meet. So continuing to work along those lines. I'm sometimes headhunted for positions in universities, and I politely say no, thank you very much, but no, thank you. I really am enjoying the freedom of working as an international consultant, and I hope I can continue to do that for some time yet.
Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Australian time, Nita, and it's been absolutely wonderful talking with you.
Oh, look, thank you so much, Lisa. It's been a pleasure talking with you as well. Thank you.
And you have been listening to the podcast Sånt i Livet i Sverige, or in English, That's Life here in Sweden, with me, Lisa Åsimäki. Till next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye for now.